Let's be honest, if Bo Nix was healthy, New England's probably not here.
Absolutely. And I am perplexed by the protracted reluctance to articulate that perspective. Individuals exhibited a pronounced apprehension in voicing such a sentiment. I comprehend the origin of this hesitation. It constitutes one of the inaugural lessons I internalized during my initial foray into content creation. I once posited an analysis suggesting a specific outcome was more attributable to one team's failure than the other's triumph. The subsequent deluge of commentary was vehement. What are you implying? Acknowledge our victory. Give credit where it is due. The intensity of the reaction was illuminating. I had not anticipated the profound sensitivity such an analytical framing would provoke. This experience underscores the principle I perpetually emphasize: consistency and impartiality. I do not reiterate these concepts as a performative exercise or to cultivate an image of detached objectivity. The reiteration functions as a mechanism for personal accountability. Vocalizing the commitment to consistency is essential. It must be a recurring mantra. This practice also establishes a framework permitting others to identify instances of inconsistency, thereby fostering a dialectic that sharpens analysis. When one adheres to a consistent evaluative framework, it becomes a tether to factual reality, a safeguard against the manipulation of statistics or the convenient reshaping of narratives to suit prevailing storylines. Applying this principle to the Denver Broncos and their quarterback, Bo Nix, this individual right here, leads to an inescapable conclusion. To entertain the notion that the Broncos would not have been a more formidable opponent with Nix under center in the AFC Championship game is frankly illogical. It is an absurd proposition. While I maintain the Seattle Seahawks were likely destined to claim the championship this season, and I am uncertain the Broncos would have ultimately prevailed, I am confident the contest would have been significantly more competitive. Bo Nix has demonstrated a particular resilience and a capacity for elevation in consequential moments that, to this point, Drake May has not been afforded the opportunity to display in a similar spotlight. Nix's performances in both of his playoff appearances, including a road game against the Buffalo Bills, evidenced an ability to rise to the occasion and deliver in high-leverage playoff scenarios. He was exceptional. Therefore, while declaring the Broncos would have definitively won the Super Bowl with a healthy Nix is an overreach, an excessive extrapolation, it is entirely reasonable to assert they would have vanquished the New England Patriots with him leading the offense. They nearly accomplished that feat with Jarrett Stidham. This is not a disparagement of the Patriots, nor is it revisionist history. I articulated this viewpoint immediately following that conference championship game, drawing the ire of some Patriots supporters. The criticism was not an attack on New England's accomplishment, but an application of a consistent analytical standard. One must maintain that standard. It is consequently rather telling how reticent the broader commentary was to acknowledge this throughout the post-championship coverage and the Super Bowl build-up. From a media logistics standpoint, I understand the imperative. The narrative focus must remain on the participants actually contesting the championship. The objective becomes celebrating and elevating the Patriots, praising figures like Raheem Mostert, Drake May, Robert Kraft, and so forth. One cannot linger on a vanquished team, especially when the audience of the participating franchise is exponentially larger. The business logic is clear. This commercial reality is precisely why I refuse to relinquish the Broncos narrative. It motivated a series of subsequent videos, including one where I posited the Patriots were living the Broncos' life, a take that now aligns seamlessly with the point being made. My argument was that all the accolades and attention being lavished upon the Patriots during the 2-week hiatus were, in a just football world, deserved by the Denver Broncos. They were deprived of that experience, not by malicious intent, but by the cruel, random vagaries of the sport, the football gods, as it were. We, as fans, were collectively robbed of that alternative championship matchup. It is permissible to voice that acknowledgement. Doing so does not diminish the Patriots' achievement, Drake May's stellar season, or the coaching prowess within the New England organization. It does not subtract from any of those accomplishments. However, it is simultaneously valid to recognize that, in my estimation, the two premier teams in the NFL were the Denver Broncos and the Seattle Seahawks. That should have been the Super Bowl matchup, the 1 seed versus the 1 seed. I maintain my belief that the Seahawks would have ultimately secured victory in that hypothetical contest. The final margin, however, would almost certainly have been narrower. It would have been a fascinating, strategically complex game, demanding a divergent approach from both sides. The reality is, the entire contest would have unfolded along a completely different tactical and emotional axis. There is no reliable mechanism to predict such an alternative outcome with precision. My conviction in Seattle's superiority does not preclude the possibility of the Broncos engineering an upset, nor does it negate the potential for a legendary display from Bo Nix. That uncertainty is the essence of the tragedy. It is what we were deprived of witnessing. Perhaps Sam Darnold, who displayed MVP-caliber play in the NFC Championship, would have been forced to reach even greater heights. We might have witnessed a shootout between Nix and Darnold, both surpassing 300 passing yards, both potentially committing turnovers under the immense pressure of a more evenly matched affair. We would have received an entirely different Super Bowl product. That is the incontrovertible reality. Instead, we witnessed the Super Bowl that materialized, where the Seahawks comprehensively steamrolled the Patriots. The outcome was unambiguous. For a Broncos fan, a passing, dismissive remark, "Let's be honest, if Bo Nix is healthy, the Patriots aren't here," is insufficient. That is not a throwaway line. It is the core of a substantive, legitimate football conversation. Yet, one must engage with such counterfactuals cautiously, as they are not universally applicable. This again highlights the necessity of consistency. One cannot selectively invoke hypotheticals. For instance, the 2022 49ers lament, "If only Drake May hadn't been injured," ignores the causal reality that the Eagles' dominant defense was the instrument of that injury. The 49ers were forced to deploy Christian McCaffrey at quarterback, precisely because their backup was also being overwhelmed by that same defensive unit. This was not a random accident, but a direct consequence of Philadelphia's superiority. Furthermore, the Eagles were an elite team that season, evidenced by their ability to score 35 points against the Chiefs in the subsequent Super Bowl. They were not simply steamrolled. The exercise requires a deliberate, digestible assessment of observable evidence. This is why the closeness of the AFC Championship game, even with Jarrett Stidham and amidst questionable play-calling decisions, was so profoundly revealing. I emphasized the play-calling and decision-making repeatedly, even in dialogue with a respected analyst who posited that, from a pure X's and O's perspective, a specific call might have been technically sound, and credit should be given to the Patriots' defense for a stellar play. One must also integrate the broader situational context. One must comprehend the game's overarching flow, acknowledge the limitations of a backup quarterback, recognize the value of securing available points, and interpret the data provided by a game remaining competitive, despite a cascade of self-inflicted errors. That collective information constitutes further, compelling proof of the Broncos' underlying quality and resilience. One cannot seek refuge behind external factors like weather conditions, a point I consistently stressed. The profound disappointment within the Broncos organization is therefore completely understandable. I recall a segment where another analyst dismissed a former player's criticism as sour grapes for predicting a Seattle blowout. That characterization misses the mark. This is the sentiment of a team and individuals who knew, with legitimate conviction, that they were the superior side, that they possessed a legitimate claim to the Super Bowl, or at the very least, deserved the honor of competing for it. Merely reaching the Super Bowl is a monumental, lifetime achievement. For many, that pinnacle appearance represents the ultimate accomplishment. It is acceptable to acknowledge that not every narrative culminates in a victory. Sometimes, the story is about the journey to the final stage. The Broncos were robbed of that opportunity, and that is a legitimate heartbreaker, a devastating turn of events. I will not harp on this point indefinitely. The energy surrounding this missed opportunity will likely resurface during off-season discussions in March and April, particularly regarding the team's emotional state, their motivational revenge factor, and their capacity to rebound. When inevitable early-season struggles occur, narratives will emerge questioning the team's psychological fortitude. We can engage the topic more fully then. Presently, however, in the immediate aftermath, I believe it remains a fair and compelling subject for analysis. I continue to find the conversation intellectually substantive. It warrants a dedicated segment, which, while not provided elsewhere, has been furnished here. Those are my comprehensive reflections. I am immensely eager to hear your perspectives. What is your assessment of the Denver Broncos' season, their heartbreaking conclusion, and the unfulfilled potential of a healthy Bo Nix in the playoffs? Share your thoughts below. I read every single comment. Whether you find yourself in agreement or passionate disagreement, let's engage in discussion, let's debate, but ultimately, let's share in the analytical process. Please consider subscribing to the channel. We are cultivating an exceptional community here, and I would be delighted for you to participate. My objective is to build a space where we feel a genuine collective connection and shared enthusiasm for the sport. I believe we are making significant progress toward that goal. Also, please remember to give this video a thumbs up, as it substantially assists with visibility and distribution within the platform's algorithmic framework. Thank you so much for your time and engagement.